I'm not a big fan of quitting. I really am not. In fact, I find the victim mindset terribly annoying, unattractive, and they're generally people that I want to stay away from. But I think that we need to understand that there's a difference between persisting in endeavor that just isn't working. It's like me putting this car in some sloppy mud and trying to get out of it, and I'm just going to spin my tires. There's a point where you have to understand that you have to quit. And I'm going to use a very clear and concise example about hurricane wind, and I'll tie that all together towards the end of this video. So pay attention. I want you to understand these examples very clearly. So I'll tell you the story, first of all, about this gal that I used to date a long time ago. Type A personality, very difficult to be around, wanted to run the relationship and lead it. If anybody were to use the term alpha female, this was a chick. I'm a firstborn, she was a firstborn. It was just brutal to deal with. It was always about answering to whatever it was that she wanted to get done or whatever demands that she had in her schedule. I ended up going through several years of dealing with that situation until I came to the realization that I was going to spend the better part of the rest of my life trying to make somebody who is generally an unhappy person happy. Now, let me get into the second part of the story before I tie it into the hurricane so you understand the importance of knowing when to quit and throw in the towel, because it is so obvious to me, or it was so obvious to me when I came to this realization. The second story that I want to share is, if I go back about 10, 12 years, it was roughly around 2009-10 when I was running my debt settlement business. At the time, we were the largest debt negotiation company in Canada. We had thousands of clients, very, very successful at what we did. And essentially, our business was to negotiate between the creditor and the debtor, a lump sum payout that would help them avoid bankruptcy, protect their credit rating, improve everything very quickly. It was very efficient and it worked really, really well. The problem was that the banks and credit card companies didn't like that we saved people so much money. So they started petitioning and lobbying the government with new ideas and regulations, and they made up a lot of stories as well too, and over-exaggerated stories about some bad players that came up from the US at that time because the dollar was on par, and they figured, well, you know, we did some things in the US that didn't work out, and the attorney generals and the FTC cracked down on us, so let's go and do business in Canada using the exact same tactics. And they did. They basically overpromised and underdelivered, let a few people down. Complaints started to, come into the Better Business Bureaus and to creditors' ombudsmans. And then the credit card companies started using those as an opportunity to try to convince the government to change legislation to put the industry out of business. And they were very successful at it. I spent the better part of probably 2.5 years or so, maybe 3 years in total. I became the lead in the lobbying effort. There was a few organizations that sort of, worked with me at the same time, but I was the one that went down to Queen's Park. I put up about $60,000 of the company's money to try to explain to the government officials, the bureaucrats, that what they were doing was going to remove options and make it harder for people to fix their credit rating, get out of debt, and improve their lifestyle. Something that you would think that the government would want or would be concerned with, because they rely on the votes of the people to stay in power. So what I learned at that time when I started going through the lobbying effort during all those years was essentially that I dealt with the New Democrat Party, the NDP. At that time was led by Jagmeet Singh. If you live in Canada, he's now the official opposition, or one of the opposition parties at the federal level. He was a pathological liar, lied to my face. There was also guys in the Progressive Conservative Party, the Liberal Party. They were all pretty much doing the exact same thing. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, you're right. This bill does look like a credit card profit protection bill. Essentially, what it was going to do was protect their profit margins to make sure that they could string people along as far as possible and make as much money out of them possible while they were suffering, paying ridiculous interest rates and destroying their credit. Only after a few years, I discovered, well, that isn't really officially going to change anything. They were all talk. There was no action. Every step of the way, whether it was royal assent or certain votes or whatever the process might have entailed, because I had lobbyists that were helping guide me through the process, it was a fail. So it ended up being a wasted effort on my part at that time. Now, to tie the entire story together about learning when to quit and when to pack it in and walk away from something, because I think that's a skill that you have to learn as a guy and get really good at. You need to get good at it in relationships. You need to get good at it in business. You need to get good at it if you're an employee. Doesn't matter what it is that you're doing or how you're going about your life. You need to know when to fight and when to pack it in, make a 180-degree pivot and go back a little bit and regather and go in a slightly different direction. So I read this book. The title of it was something along the lines of Too Bad to Stay, Too Good to Go. And I don't remember the full name, but the last name was Kirschenbaum. So you can look it up. And essentially, it was a guidebook that she had put out to help people to navigate something like a divorce or breaking up with somebody. And it was a sequence of stories. And the one story that resonated with me was the one about the hurricane. So the hurricane story basically was, if you're in a long-term relationship with somebody and it feels like you're constantly walking into hurricane force winds, it's probably better at that point in time, if you don't see the winds changing direction, lightening up, or improving, to pack it in and walk away from it, which was very compelling because by the time I had read that book, I had also, at some point prior to that, been down in the Caribbean in a category, I don't know, it was a 2 or 3 hurricane. Again, knowing when to quit is incredibly important. You should recognize, go outside when there's gales. If you have an opportunity when there's high winds, see what it's like walking into wind where shit's blowing around. You literally have to lean into it and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you find that you're doing something right now at a job, in a relationship, in a business venture that you're launching, anything at all, where it's like walking into hurricane force winds where your head is 2 feet ahead of your feet because you got to lean into it so heavily, it's probably worth spinning around 180 degrees, calling it a day, and reorganizing yourself and pivoting in a different direction. That is if you don't see an end to the winds. If it's for a day, if it's for a couple of days, I would say endure, fight on, fix it. But if it seems like it's going to be going on for a long time, or even the rest of your life, and it won't ever change, it's probably better that you pack it in, call it quits, and call it a day.